Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Sociastrology. Today we're going to look at the new moon in Cancer that is coming up on July 5th, 2024. It looks quite pleasant and lovely, but there's a couple little things to look out for, but I definitely wanted to make the energy known to you so that you can work with what we've got here, because there's a lot to work with that's really beautiful. So yeah, if you appreciate this content, then do give it a thumbs up if you would like. I would very much cherish that. And yeah, if you see anything that I happen to be overlooking, or you want to share your experience with full moons or this full moon, then I would love to engage with you in the comments below. And yeah, if you want to see more content like this, as well as like sociological, historical transits, as well as personal transits, there's going to be some election coverage and so forth coming up in the future shortly here, then please do feel free to join the community by hitting the subscribe button and sticking around for future episodes. So, without further introduction, let us dive into this new moon in Cancer. Okay, so here we have the chart for the new moon in Cancer. This is taking place on the 5th of July at Central Time, 5:57 p.m. And I will not be using houses here because depending on where you are, the houses will shift. So I'm just using this 0 Aries as the ascending point. Some things that really stand out, it's not shown here, but this new moon is taking place on the star of Sirius. This is one of the brighter stars in our sky. It is considered really beneficial and a very pleasant star to be working with here. There is one caution with it, which can be physical accidents or injury. So I do just want to point that out real quick, just to kind of keep that in mind. Be careful, especially if you're playing with explosives and things like that for other reasons that we'll get into. We do have the moon also applying to a conjunction later with Venus here. So this is a very pleasant new moon. It's ruled by the moon because this is taking place in Cancer. It should be pretty flowing. The emotions should be pretty good and pretty coherent. You should be able to feel into things and relate to people quite well. And that energy will be starting for us on the 4th. So uh, again, if you are engaging in any sort of festivities the day beforehand, this should really help with that. The moon will be moving into Cancer on the 4th this year. So going into some of the aspects that this new moon is making here, we have a sextile to Saturn in Pisces here. So most things that you're working on right now, new moons are really good for starting new things, of course. They should be working out quite well. You should have some staying power with whatever you're starting at this point, and you should be able to see it through. There's a practical side to this. There's kind of an understanding of the ultimate goal of whatever you are doing at the time. We also have a really nice sextile to Mars here from the new moon. So again, this is lending itself, especially considering we have this trine from the new moon to Saturn. Saturn is sextile to Mars, and then Mars is sextile to the new moon. We have this really practical, useful, flowing energy that you can take advantage of. So, for instance, if you've taken the day off of work before and you feel like you're doing a little bit of catch up, that should be fine during this time. What else do we have? We do have this new moon taking place at the midpoint of the eclipse seasons. So we're halfway through from one eclipse season back in March and April through to the next eclipse season, which will be taking place in Libra and Virgo, because we're actually going to have I believe, a full moon eclipse, which will be pinging within Pisces with the moon and with Virgo with the sun, because we're starting to move into eclipses next year, which are going to be on the Virgo down here, Pisces axis, rather than what we've been dealing with for the past year and a half of Aries and Libra. So these nodes, they always move slowly backwards, uh, a little bit backward and forward, but the general movement is backwards. So the the north node, for instance, is moving backward through the early degrees of Aries, and it's going to be moving into Pisces going forward. So what we have here is the midpoint. This could bring up uh, a lot of developments with regard to issues that came up around the last and few preceding eclipses that we've had over the past year and a half. And a lot of these geopolitically have been tied into the situation in Palestine and the war with Israel and everything. That started with an eclipse during during Libra season of 2023 when there was an eclipse, and it was triggered again when the eclipse season began in March and April with the student protests in the US, as well as additional developments, Israel hitting some Iranian troops in Syria, and then Iran retaliating. And then off of that, I also noticed that the eclipse point here, the node was strongly involved in the timing of the helicopter accident that had the Iranian president aboard. So those have been pretty heavy hitters, of course, with the North Node in Aries. The fact that issues of war have come up during this time quite a bit is kind of no surprise. But again, we should be seeing, since this is hitting the midpoint, some developments on that front, some significant ones, not just the kind of day-to-day developments that we've been seeing. We also have other aspects that aren't directly involving the sun and the moon during this time. We have a nice sextile between Mercury in Leo, which is also the ruler, as Mercury rules Gemini, of Jupiter here in Gemini. So this is a sextile aspect. This should allow for people to keep kind of an open mind. Conversation should go well. Any sort of need to relate or need to exchange information should be going pretty smoothly during this time. There's a bit of an excitement with communication, an enjoyment of communication with these energies of Gemini and Leo. And there's just generally a cooperative spirit here involved. We also have Venus is applying this trine to Neptune from Cancer, the late degrees of Cancer, to the late degrees of Pisces. So we have more of this flowing trine energy between these water signs of Cancer and Pisces. This should allow you, if you have any sort of creative work to do, this would be an absolutely perfect time to do it, especially if you're starting a new creative project. This would be really brilliant, perfect for that. There's an aesthetic tendency and proclivity involved in this specific aspect of the trine from Venus to Neptune, especially in these signs, and especially with the moon ruling Venus here. So this should also be quite pleasant for any sort of relationships that you're involved in. There's a strong compassionate spirit, similar to the Mercury sextile to Jupiter. There's a general understanding of other people and willingness and desire to have harmony between yourself and other people. We also do have an applying aspect from Venus to Pluto. So if you do happen, this is pretty wide and it'll be coming closer in the coming week. But if you do feel that there are any kind of power plays or unequal dynamics within relationships that you are experiencing, this would be a good time to address those matters. For one thing, to dig them up, like if there's an unequal dynamic that you are involved in, maybe trying to consider even beyond what the other person is doing, how you may have found yourself within that situation, because Pluto oppositions and Pluto hard aspects tend to be pretty good, even the trines and so forth, at digging up shadow energy, digging up psychological constraints and uh, things like this. So any sort of relationship dynamic issues that you're feeling, this is a good time to look within with regard to those, as well as to address them in a cooperative and compassionate manner in order to achieve what it is that you're trying to achieve within the relationship in a more harmonious way. We also have a square between Venus and Chiron. I don't have the aspects to Chiron on here, but Chiron's at 23 degrees of Aries and Venus is at 22 degrees of Cancer. This is a tight square aspect that's applying. And this also can bring light to any issues that you might be having within relationships, any wounds, again, looking into why you might be involving yourself in a certain situation if you're not enjoying it. This coming from potentially the past, potentially issues of self-worth coming up. And the reason that they're coming up is to address them. We have so much flowing energy here. You should be able to be compassionate with yourself and others and really understand these dynamics. So it's a good time to really consider all of that. Let's see. We also have, so we have that sextile between Mars and Saturn, which is very highly productive. Again, if you need to get any work done, this is very conducive to that, especially Saturn in Pisces can be a little bit forgiving, but Mars in Taurus is going to be highly determined to finish things. So you should be able to feel pretty good about what you're able to accomplish during this time and really give yourself a pat on the back once you complete tasks. We also have, like I pointed out, Mars is hitting the midpoint of the Sun Moon combination here and Saturn. So this is a very strong point here. Again, you should be able to channel your drive and channel your energy in a highly productive way in order to get yourself to a place of comfort, getting all of the stuff done that you need to get done and then being finished with it and being able to relax here. And of course, we have coming up this month this conjunction between Mars and Uranus. This is quite explosive. I'll do potentially an episode on this. It'll probably be a bit shorter. I addressed it in the monthly forecast and went into it in some depth there. But keep in mind that this is going to be the key word for this would be that this is an explosive combination here. So I will really reiterate, if you haven't seen any other videos, careful with fireworks during this time, especially with this occurring on when this comes and joins Uranus. It will be occurring on the star of Algol, which is a star that is not pleasant at all. It's considered one of the worst stars. So considering we have that, and then we have this new moon on Sirius, which is lovely and wonderful, but can lend itself to injury or accident, really watch out for your limbs during this time, especially if you are, uh, you know, playing with fire, as we like to do once a year in this country and other countries as well. This is the best fireworks displays that I've ever seen where New Year's Eve celebrations in Berlin. They know how to play with their fireworks out in the streets there. So this is going to be very much a presence that we'll be dealing with throughout the month. It's worth keeping in mind when you're driving. Be careful when you're operating any sort of machinery or anything that could injure you. When you are communicating with others, be quite careful with that as well. Watch out for hurt feelings and things like this, because these two are being ruled by Venus as well. So there could be a bit of soft feelings over here, getting really surprisingly trampled, even though it shouldn't be the case here. This conjunction is really strong, and it could be a little trampling. So do be a little bit careful about that. And otherwise, it's a really beautiful time. It's a good time for starting anything, even if symbolically. So if you want to do anything with, this is a decent electional chart to work with. We do have the conjunction here to keep in mind, as well as the opposition to Pluto by Venus. But if you want to start anything this month, it would be great. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to be like, okay, I need to complete the project during this new moon. That's way too fast. But if you can do a symbolic start to something, so for instance, even just, you know, write it, if this is a project, for instance, just writing the name of the project in a notebook, put some ideas down on the paper, and have that be the kind of the birth of something. So that kind of symbolic starting point, that is really great to do during this time. This is also a really excellent time for any sort of cosmetic or aesthetic work. I tend to try and aim for positive aspects with Venus, as well as new moons, to get my hair cut. And so generally those cuts the hair tends to grow faster if you get it cut during a new moon, and you tend to be more pleased with the results if you do it when there are positive aspects involving Venus. So considering the fact that we have all of that wrapped up right here in a really beautiful way, the personality, the way that you are presenting yourself to the world with the sun, the aesthetics with Venus, and then the moon here as starting something and feeling really good about it. That's also really perfect for this time. We also have some surprises potentially popping up in the lead up to this aspect between Mars and Uranus. So keep that in mind. Again, be careful with driving, be careful with anything that could potentially hurt you. Just be a little bit more cautious. It is a good time to spend with others, with Venus involved here, and then all of these flowing and cooperative, good communication, good relating, good, strongly compassionate energies. You may even be able to, with this Venus applying opposition to Pluto here, as it's also this opposition is channeling through Neptune, through compassion, with the sextile to Pluto, and then the trine to the Venus here. And it's also channeling through Uranus here. So Venus sextile Uranus, trine to Pluto. There's a lot of really good ways that you could potentially even help other people with emotional or psychological issues that are coming up for them. So you may be able to counsel people really well during this time. But, you know, I always follow the advice of really watch out for if people are asking, you know. Try not to offer too much unsolicited advice. There's a lot of good energy here, so it should be received well, but still always good rule of thumb to go by. And then finally, just again, also be careful with crowds with this aspect here. So for instance, on the 4th of July, just kind of keep an eye out, watch your possessions without a doubt. Make sure that the people who are playing with fireworks around you, I had some of that this past weekend, and some of them wound up falling over and being aimed directly at our little group of people, which freaked some of the people out quite a bit. But so So be careful about things like that during this time. Also, there can be anger problems with people who are unwell during this time. So, again, that's why I caution a little bit about crowds. Try not to let it rain on your parade here, but just do kind of keep that in mind. Keep your eyes open for things, and definitely trust your instincts and your intuition with this combination here is that shouldn't lead you too far astray. So that is what we have for this new moon. It looks quite beautiful. I really hope that you are able to enjoy it and that you had a wonderful 4th of July if you celebrate. And yeah, again, feel free to stick around by subscribing. I would love to have you here for future episodes. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful time and I will see you soon. Bye.